fear there may be a few more coming, but I think, therefore, we should get started. The people of Kosovo will forever mark February 17th as a milestone. On that day, Kosovo declared its independence and ended nearly a decade of uncertainty as a UN protectorate. The new country has been formally recognized by the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and a number of other countries. I believe this step will help shore up the security and stability of the Balkans. I congratulate President Bush for his leadership on this issue. I also want to acknowledge our diplomatic corps in Pristina for their untiring efforts to oversee the process of stabilization, negotiation, and the resolution of Kosovo's final status. And I want to pay tribute to the Kosovar leadership, which demonstrated remarkable patience and maturity in the face of growing public pressure. Questions have been raised in some sectors of the international community about the legality and legitimacy of Kosovo's declaration of independence, as well as America's recognition. No, I apologize for starting. Legitimacy of Kosovo's declaration of independence, as well as America's recognition of the new country. I support the position of the administration and of our leading European allies that the situation of Kosovo is unique, given the history of ethnic cleansing, as well as the unprecedented level of involvement by the United States and NATO. A year ago, I visited Kosovo with Senator John McCain, no less, at a time when he was visiting the Balkans instead of Ohio, Texas, and Pennsylvania. I was struck by the immense need for economic development. As long as Kosovo's final status remained unresolved, businesses were reluctant to invest there, and international financial institutions were unable to offer the needed monetary assistance. Now that Kosovo's political status has been clarified, its leaders must focus on building a strong, healthy, and self-sustaining economy. The challenge is immense. Kosovo has unacceptably high unemployment, is plagued by corruption, and has experienced limited economic growth. But it also has tremendous assets, among them rich mineral resources, a young and resilient population, and a robust drive to succeed. The Donors Conference scheduled for this summer should enable Americans, Europeans, and our international partners to devise an effective strategy to help boost Kosovo's economic development. In addition, the leaders of Kosovo face the tremendous responsibility of ensuring that that fledgling country remains a safe and hospitable home for all citizens, including the Serb minority population. I welcome the government's early efforts to implement the wise recommendations made by former Finnish President Martti Ahtisaari, who served as the UN envoy to Kosovo during the status negotiations. These recommendations included the passage of laws on the protection of minorities, police, and local government. I also pleased that Kosovo's Prime Minister, Hashim Thaçi, appointed 2 ethnic Serbs to his cabinet. However, I'm troubled by reports that in response to intimidation from officials in Belgrade, these ministers are currently sitting at home rather than continuing to work collaboratively with their Albanian colleagues. The international community, particularly the NATO Kosovo force, should continue to send strong and unambiguous signals that the minority communities can count on their protection. The Serbian minority must be allowed to prosper and participate in the new country. While we recognize the immense pain that the resolution of Kosovo's final status has caused for many Serbs, it was shameful to see the U.S. Embassy in Belgrade in flames while Serbian police officers were idle bystanders watching the fire. When Bosnian Serb protesters tried to launch a similar attack on Banja Luka, police there were far more responsible in preventing it. Serbian political leaders must follow the rule of law, behave as a mature democracy, and urge restraint by Serbs throughout the region. The recent re-election of Serbian President Boris Tadić was a welcome sign that the majority of Serbs decidedly do want a Western-oriented future. The voters supported a candidate who clearly stated his European aspirations over those who would have isolated Serbia. My strong wish is that the Serbian people will reaffirm this decision in the snap parliamentary elections called after the after the collapse of Prime Minister Wojciech Kosztunica's government this past weekend. Voters will have the opportunity to indicate strong support for a Serbia that is firmly rooted in the Euro-Atlantic community rather than governed by radicals who seek closer ties to Russia. Although Russia has presented itself as a good friend to Serbia and has been richly rewarded for its support with a 51% share of the Serbia state-owned oil company, the Serb people must realize that their future lies to the west and not to the east. As it happens, this latest chapter of Balkan history is unfolding on the eve of the latest round of NATO enlargement. In particular, 3 Adriatic countries, Albania, Croatia, and Macedonia, are seeking an invitation to join this military alliance at the Bucharest summit in April. There certainly are strong arguments for incorporating all 3 countries, particularly given the need to stabilize the region as the independence of Kosovo brings to a close the final stage of the dissolution of Yugoslavia. And of course, there is widely shared desire to welcome the region into the Euro-Atlantic community. However, in order for NATO to stay strong and effective, it is important that new members fully meet the membership criteria. Today, I invite Assistant Secretary Freed to provide an assessment of the current readiness of these countries and their likely prospects for membership. The committee would also welcome your thoughts on whether the administration plans to support the extension of membership action plans to the countries Georgia and Ukraine. Over a century ago, the geopolitical term Balkanization emerged to denote what happens when empires or countries fragment into smaller states that are often hostile to one another. It is my hope that during the 21st century, this term will fall into disuse. For many years, the Balkan region has been the stage for compelling and dramatic action that plays out in unforeseen ways. It remains a site of strategic importance to the United States and Europe. This committee looks forward to discussing the changes and challenges in the Balkans today with our distinguished witness. Normally at this time, we would turn to Ranking Member Ileana Ros-Lehtinen for remarks, and we will today. But because she's just come back from Florida, and she received an honor that I'll say that I will now speak to, since this was written for me before we thought she'd be here. And the honor she earned last evening was being inducted into Florida Women's Hall of Fame. No steroid use. No enhancements. She joined the ranks there of achievers, the likes of tennis legend Chris Evert and Janet Reno, the first female Attorney General of the United States. The Florida Women's Hall of Fame honors those who have made significant contributions, the improvement of life for women and for all citizens of the state. The State Commission on the Status of Women chooses the finalists each year. The governor selects the inductees. In announcing this tribute to Ileana, the Hall of Fame described her, that which we already know here in the committee and in the House, as a gifted leader and a strong defender of human rights. Took note of her early work as an educator, her service in the state Senate, and her commitment to protecting the environment. All this, plus Ileana's well-known work on the committee and her dedication to her husband and 2 daughters, have combined to make this living dynamo the wonder we know her to be. So congratulations, Ileana, and I recognize you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. That was an unexpected surprise. Thank you. And who knew that the planes would land on time? So I was able to actually make the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very timely hearing. And thank you to Assistant Secretary Freed for being here with us today to discuss these critical issues that the Chairman had pointed out in his opening statement. I look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Secretary, on your assessment on the potential impact of Kosovo's declaration of independence on the stability of the entire region, and whether it could present a challenge to our United States policy in that region, given the existence of those who continue to see violence as an option, despite the destruction wrought by the conflicts in the 1990s. Soon after taking power in '89, Serbia's former leader, Milosevic, used radical nationalism to crack down on Kosovo's ethnic Albanian population, imposing oppressive and discriminatory policies and taking away their previously held autonomy. The situation in Kosovo deteriorated drastically, and by 1999, led by U.S. and our NATO allies to intervene militarily in order to stop an ethnic cleansing that was being carried out by Milosevic and his military against Kosovo's ethnic Albanians. Just 9 years ago, NATO bombed Serbian cities, its infrastructure, military forces for 78 days, forcing those forces to pull out of Kosovo. Since then, Kosovo has been administered, as we know, by the United Nations with the backing of a NATO-led peacekeeping force. Over the past 2 years, strong efforts have been made by the United States and our European Union allies to bring Serbia and the Albanians in Kosovo to an agreement on a peaceful settlement of Kosovo's future status. Last year, the UN envoy presented a proposal that would have provided for Kosovo's supervised independence, accompanied by strong protection of minority rights and multi-ethnic representation in the government of Kosovo. That plan was and continues to be supported by the United States and most of our European allies, but it was rejected by Serbia and Russia, and subsequent talks between the European Union, the U.S., and Russia failed to arrive at an agreement. Kosovo then went ahead and declared its independence on February 17th of this year, while accepting the obligations included in the UN envoy's plan. The U.S. and many other countries recognize Kosovo's independence. However, a range of other countries, including Spain, Greece, Cyprus, Romania, Canada, China, and India, have thus far refrained from such recognition, possibly for fear of encouraging separatist or independence movements in their own countries. Russia, of course, continues to call the Declaration of Independence by Kosovo and its recognition a violation of international law. The Declaration of Independence was followed by protests and violence in Serbia and the Serb portions of Kosovo and Bosnia, including an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Serbia, an attempted attack on the U.S. consulate in Bosnia, and the destruction of 2 customs posts on the border between Serbia and Kosovo. Such violence could well subside, or it could lead to more serious conflict. If it leads to conflict, we need to know how the burden of restoring stability will be shared by our European allies. In November, I wrote to President Bush to express my concern that given our obligations in other parts of the world, we need to be certain that our European allies will provide additional troops for Kosovo if such troops are needed. I received a response from the Department of State expressing confidence that our European allies are committed to do just that. And Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the text of that letter be inserted in the record of this hearing at this point.
Without objection.
So, Secretary Freed, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would appreciate any details or further information that you could provide to us concerning your discussion with our European allies to ensure that they are indeed committed to providing the troops needed in such a case. And I would also be interested in hearing your thoughts on how Kosovo's independence is expected to impact the sometimes fragile political situation in Bosnia, where it has been reported that some Serb nationalists have pressed for a declaration of independence from Bosnia by the Serb portion of that country. What arguments are we raising with the ethnic Serbs in Bosnia to dissuade them from such a declaration of independence? And with respect to the ethnic Albanian communities in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, what steps are we taking to ensure that there is no misinterpretation by any of the parties within the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia regarding the meaning of Kosovo's independence for the future of that country? Finally, Mr. Secretary, I ask for your comments on the argument that the recognition of Kosovo's independence sets a precedent for future recognition of other separatist movements. For example, how does this recognition of Kosovo's independence by the U.S. apply, if at all, to the future status of regions such as Azerbaijan and Georgia, both of which are governed by separatist movements. I look forward to your testimony, Mr. Secretary, and your comments, and once again, thank you for your appearance before our committee today, and thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for your kind words.
Well, thank you, and congratulations again. Any other members of the committee wish to make an opening statement? Mr. Engel, recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to see you in the chair, and it's good to see my good friend Dan Fried testifying. I know of no one who has worked harder on this issue and who has the depth of knowledge that Secretary Fried has, and I'm eagerly awaiting to listen to what he has to say. I have been to Kosovo many times in the 19-plus years that I've been in Congress. I have been a supporter of Kosovo independence all that time. I truly believe that there was no alternative, or there is no alternative to Kosovo independence. The breakup of the former Yugoslavia gave the people of Kosovo, in my opinion, the same opportunity that all the rest of the peoples of the former Yugoslavia had, and that is self-determination. And therefore, people who say this is some kind of precedent are absolutely wrong, because Yugoslavia is gone, it's broken up, and there's no reason why the people of Kosovo should not have the same rights of self-determination that all the other peoples of the former Yugoslavia had. We have all these nations born out of Yugoslavia, Croatia and Macedonia and Montenegro and Slovenia and all the other nations as well, and therefore Kosovo is the same. The Ahtisaari plan absolutely makes the most sense. It is independence, but it is supervised independence at the beginning, so there is stability. And I think, frankly, the Bush administration has handled this absolutely correctly and right in terms of recognition. I'm proud of the role the United States has played, and of course, the people of Kosovo are so pro-U.S. It's one of the places in the world where chants of USA are just broken out all the time. When independence was declared, I think we saw more American flags in the streets of Pristina than Albanian flags or the new Kosovo flag. That's the high esteem that the people there hold the U.S. And certainly after 1999 and the ethnic cleansing of the former dictator Milosevic, there is no way that Belgrade could have ruled Kosovo ever again. And so this is the logical conclusion. There's a lot of work to do. It's a start, not an end, and the international community has to be engaged, and the United States has to be engaged. But I am absolutely convinced that this is not only the right way to go, the moral way to go, but the correct way to go in terms of doing what's right, and in doing what's right for stability in the region. I intend to go to Kosovo again when there will be international celebration, and hope that as many of my colleagues can come as well. And again, Kosovo independence is not a precedent, as some of the other countries have said, that every separatist group in the world is going to declare independence. Because of the unique circumstances of the genocide, the ethnic cleansing that Milosevic was carrying out, because of the fact that the former Yugoslavia has broken up, we're not discussing whether it should, it's gone. This is not a precedent. This is just a natural progression of things. So I again want to, as I always have, congratulated Dan Fried for the wonderful work that he has done personally, and for the work that we as Americans have all done together. And I look forward again to going to Kosovo. I also am looking forward to hearing what Secretary Fried has to say about the NATO Bucharest summit coming in April. I'm a supporter of Albania, Croatia, and Macedonia becoming a part of NATO, and I'm interested in hearing what the Secretary has to say about that. I think now more than ever, incorporating the Adriatic three countries that I mentioned is critical for Balkan stability and cooperation. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members wish to make an opening statement? Case, we want to welcome Assistant Secretary of State Freed, Dan Freed, been a career Foreign Service officer, former U.S. Ambassador to Poland, member of the National Security Council staff, and generally receives very high reviews for the work he has done and is doing now as Assistant Secretary. Welcome. You know the procedure. We'll include your entire statement in the record and look forward to your testimony, Secretary Freed. Let me just say, I guess some bells went off. My guess is it's a procedural vote. Unless you have strong objections, I think we should. I'm willing to stay and even miss this vote if it's truly as procedural as I think it is, and complete the Secretary's testimony, and then if we're still in voting, we'll go vote and come back for questions. But Secretary Freed, go ahead.
You. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like at the outset to express my own sense of loss, the administration's sense of loss as well at the passing of Chairman Lantos. We will miss his moral voice. I will miss it personally. Mr. Chairman, members, the 20th century began with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and ended with the dissolution of Yugoslavia. These two bloody conflicts were provoked by the same scourge of violent ethnic nationalism. And given this history, America's efforts in the Balkans over 3 administrations have been based on one overarching objective: the integration of the region into Euro-Atlantic institutions. Since 1945, and again since 1989, these institutions, the European Union and NATO, have helped historical enemies in Europe find reconciliation and friendship. Kosovo's declaration of independence was the last chapter in the dissolution of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had its merits as a way to deal with that region's ethnic mix, but it is gone. Slobodan Milosevic's ravages ended this multinational effort, and its breakup was exceedingly violent. In 1989, Milosevic stripped Kosovo of its autonomy. Wars followed. Milosevic's policy of ethnic cleansing of Kosovar Albanians forced NATO's intervention in Kosovo in 1999. The United Nations administered Kosovo after the end of the conflict, acting under Security Council Resolution 1244. That same resolution authorized a NATO-led peacekeeping force to provide for a safe and secure environment. International negotiations about Kosovo's status failed to bring Belgrade and Pristina closer together. UN Special Envoy Mati Ahtisaari nevertheless recommended a compromise blueprint for Kosovo's future: supervised independence and a comprehensive plan to provide protection for minorities, especially the Serbian minority in Kosovo. The Kosovar leadership accepted that compromise. Belgrade did not. The people of Kosovo on February 17th declared independence, which the United States and most European countries have now recognized. We could not leave Kosovo in limbo indefinitely. Instead, we have supported the birth of the world's newest democracy. I visited Kosovo last Friday. The Kosovo leadership is rightly focused on building their country. I met as well with the 2 ethnic Serb Kosovar government ministers, who are in fact active, I'm happy to report, and stressed that they want their community to remain and prosper in Kosovo, which is good news. I should add, Mr. Chairman, that they specifically requested that I mention in this testimony that they are committed to work for the good of the Serbian community in Kosovo, despite independence, and that they reject any kind of violence. They asked for our help, and I said we would do what we could. The international community has a responsibility to help Kosovo, and I can report that this is indeed happening. Kosovo will be supervised for a period by an international civilian office that will be European-led with strong U.S. participation. The European Union, will deploy a rule of law mission called ULEX to Kosovo, with almost 2,000 international staff and over 1,000 local staff. NATO, through KFOR, will continue to provide security on the ground and is authorized to operate throughout Kosovo under Security Council Resolution 1244. NATO will continue to play a role in the establishment of a new Kosovo security force and a civilian agency to oversee it. Our allies are, in fact, doing what they need to. About 90% of the KFOR troops are non-U.S. They are European. With our assistance and the support of the World Bank and IMF, Kosovo will be viable. The United States will participate in a major donors conference this summer. Although Europe will contribute much assistance, the United States and other partners will play a role. 32 countries have recognized Kosovo or declared their intention to do so, including about 2/3 of the European Union.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yes, sir.
I was wrong. It's not just a procedural vote. If this motion passes, the entire government collapses. So I am going to recess this hearing for a few minutes, go make that vote to keep the government intact, and then come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be here.